It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Ambassador Ken Hackett. Prior to his appointment by President Barack Obama as ambassador to the Holy See in the Vatican in 1993, Ambassador Hackett served Catholic Relief Services for over 40 years, the last 20 as its president and CEO. CRS is an international humanitarian agency supported by the U.S. Catholic community, where he led 5,000 employees in over 100 countries. He joined CRS back in 1972, starting his career in Sierra Leone, and also held assignments in the Philippines and Kenya. As Regional Director for Africa, Ambassador Hackett led CRS's response to the Ethiopian famine and supervised operations during the crisis in Somalia in the early 90s. It was under his leadership that CRS responded to recovery efforts such as those following the Rwanda genocide, the Bosnian and Kosovo emergencies, the Asian tsunami, and the Haitian earthquake. Prior to joining CRS, he served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana for 3 years. Ambassador Hackett is originally from West Roxbury, Massachusetts. He earned his undergraduate degree from Boston College and now lives in Fernandina Beach, Florida. Ambassador Ken Hackett, welcome into the Corner Office.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. And where's the podcast find you today? You're at home in Florida, I think?
I am. I'm in Florida.
All right. How's the weather down there? I'm not quite home yet.
Well, today it's beautiful. We had a storm last night that was like anything I've experienced in Africa or Philippines or and the tree cutting firms are in business today.
It blew a lot of things down, I bet. I
Yeah,
love how that air gets clear in Florida after a bunch of rain too, huh?
it certainly does.
Wonderful, great. Well, I'm not sure if you're originally from Florida. Something tells me you're not, but would love to hear about your early years. So why don't we start at the beginning, where you grew up and what your early family life was like?
Well, I grew up in Boston, and I am the archetypal Boston Irish Catholic. Uh, and I left there, went after college into the Peace Corps, into Ghana, West Africa. I spent 3.5 years there, came back and stumbled into a job with Catholic Relief Services,
Mm, yeah.
where I spent a good chunk of my life.
Wow, that's a great organization. We want to get into it, but I want to go a little deeper, younger. When you said basically a traditional Boston Catholic family, how many brothers and sisters?
I have 6.
Right. I knew it would be probably up in the multiples there. And
Yeah.
mom and dad, what did they do?
Well, my father worked for the telephone company and started climbing poles and then moved into upper management of New England Tel and Tel. And my mother was a stay-home mom.
She had plenty of work to do there, I
Yeah,
bet.
7 kids.
And you grew up in a traditional Catholic family, mass a couple of times a week. And is that something that you went through, go to Catholic school as well?
Yeah, I went to Catholic school, became an altar boy. We lived close to the church, so a good chunk of my life was football, baseball, basketball, roller skating in the church parking lot.
Right.
It was free and it was big. So until the priest usually came out and sent us away with an admonishment that would probably go to hell if we came back.
What were some of the things that you remember growing up, particularly from mom and dad? Any inspirations or, influences that you would say? And where were you in the pecking order? Were you oldest, youngest, somewhere in the middle?
I was the second oldest,
Okay.
and we were a close knit family. My father worked hard and died early. He died at age 51 of cardiac problems, but he had every kind of problems. In those days, it was a couple of packs of Camels a day and
Sure.
a lot of pressure on the job. And but my mom was always there for us. Wherever we were. She was behind us.
I love that. Did you enjoy school? Were you a good student?
I was a terrible student and didn't particularly like school. I just wasn't one who caught on to, even though I went through Jesuit high school, um, it was a strain, and you know, 4 years of Latin, 2 years of Greek. Uh,
Right.
and I just didn't click with it. But I, in the end, got a lot out of my education, both in high school and in college, in Jesuit institutions. I found that their approach to life and their stress on being a man for others was something that it was motivating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Or was it nuns mostly teaching, or was it more of a?
Oh, in grammar school, yes,
Yeah.
but in high school it was Jesuit priests,
Jesuit priest, right? Right.
and in college it was a mixture of Jesuits and others.
Yeah. Did the priest take the rulers to the back of the hand like the nuns did earlier on,
No,
or?
no, no, no. Jesuits don't do that. They intimidate you in other ways, intellectually.
Okay.
But the nuns were the ones with the rulers.
Did you enjoy any particular classes, or were there things, Ambassador, that you enjoyed early on?
I kind of liked philosophy, logic, um, the kind of arcane things rather than the straight out curriculum that was offered. And then once I got into college, I found myself. I was in a business school, school of management, and so those areas of operations research and marketing, um, uh, human human resource type of things that really caught my fancy. But that was later. That was in my junior and senior
Yeah. Did you work at all in junior high and high school?
year.
That's part of
I worked from the time I was 7.
it. And that was
Started off with
where?
paper routes and
Yeah.
worked in fruit stands and worked all the way through college. Um, Worked in a factory. Uh, Worked during the summer in construction, uh, in a catering company. Where the good thing about working in a catering company is when you're in the back of the truck, you can eat all the desserts you can possibly grab because
I
you're the
love
only one in the back of the truck. Uh,
it.
yeah, we
And
we paid our way through college.
yeah, I was going to say, so a lot of that was probably had to be saved for your
Yeah,
college. And did you
absolutely.
go to college locally? Where did you go to school?
Yes, Boston College. I went to
Boston
Boston
College,
College High School and Boston College University.
which is a Jesuit university as
Right.
well. Great, great, great learning there. And all your siblings as well, did they all go to BC?
My older brother did. Uh, my younger brothers went in different directions, and my sisters went to BU, um, Leslie College in Boston. They all stayed around
All
Boston.
stay local. Yeah. Did you stay at
People in
home?
Boston don't usually leave.
Right, right. It's great to have. Did you live at home during your college years, or did you live on
I
campus?
did.
Yeah. And what did you study?
Studied business
Yeah. And
and
did
management
right.
and how you get things done. uh, and how you motivate people, all those types of things, which uh, served me well in later life.
Yeah. What was that first job you took coming out of college?
Coming out of college,
Yeah.
I went into the Peace Corps
Okay.
and spent 3.5 years in the Peace Corps, and that was another super learning experience. Um, we were supposed to be advising the agricultural cooperative movement,
Now,
but
was
the
this in Ghana, Ambassador?
this was in Ghana,
Yeah.
and the the movement uh, had really been devastated by the previous president. He basically drained all its coffers,
Mm.
and so the credibility of the agricultural cooperative movement was at a very, very low point when we 21-year-old kids came in to advise these farmers on how to market their produce better. When the farmers knew quite well, hey, we got ripped off before. We're not going to do it again. So that proved to be a bust. And as such, I got involved with managing a well drilling program, uh,
Mm.
and that was good, fun, uh, productive. I learned about managing people. Uh, when you got a guy down in a well, digging a well 60 foot down, uh, you got to motivate to get him to go back down.
Yeah.
So I
And,
did that. In my third year in the Peace Corps, I worked in a different locality. I worked at Akasambo Dam, and the Akasambo Dam was built in the 60s and dammed up the a front of the Volta River,
mm,
and it was a massive uh, flooding uh, behind that dam. And my job was to go out and village, visit very, very small villages that had come up on the side of the lake and do demographic and agricultural land use surveys.
mm.
So I was out 3 weeks out of the month in a small boat with a couple of guys, just going village to village. Now, village, these were uh, 4 and 5 house villages, mud huts, grass roofs. It was pretty basic.
And were you doing that with a partner? Is that typically how you do
Well,
it?
I actually worked for the United Nations at that time.
Okay.
I was still a Peace Corps volunteer,
Yeah.
but it was a United Nations project, the Food and Agricultural Organization.
Yeah.
Um, and my boss was a rural sociologist, a Brit, um, and he would advise us on how to collect the data, and that's what we were. We were data collectors, interviewing people, finding out about their lives, and what motivated them.
Yeah, fascinating. You had a couple of different choices, obviously, when you got your business degree. What made you choose the Peace Corps back then?
Well, I did the requisite interviews with Ford and General Electric, and I think it was Esso then, uh, before it became Exxon. And I just it I didn't get any positive vibe from them, and they didn't get a positive vibe from me. This was 1968,
Mm.
and it just seemed that our country was in a downward spot. We were
Very
at war in
tumultuous
Vietnam, of
times.
course,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and I just the opportunity to join the Peace Corps just presented itself, and I grabbed it.
yeah. Fantastic. And then you came back after 3 years. What was the next opportunity you took on?
I came back and I applied for a job at the United Nations, at CARE, and at Catholic Relief Services. And the
Mm.
first job interview in Manhattan was with Catholic Relief Services. I went in, they offered me a job and said, "Would you like to go back to Africa?" And I said, "Sure would." And within a month, I was on my way to Sierra Leone in
Wow.
West Africa. And there I stayed for hmm, three, almost 4 years, I think.
Yes. And what was the services you were providing at that time, Mr. Sierras?
Well, we ran a maternal and child health program for about 60,000 people, and that had a staff of, well, there were 8 vehicles, three in a vehicle. So that was one program, and a nurse, a couple of nurses would go around and visit women and provide immunizations and supplementary food and other kind of health services. So that was one program. The second program was a leprosy control program.
Mm.
Leprosy was still a serious issue in some countries in West Africa, and in this particular country, it was a big issue. And we managed the national leprosy control program. Uh, and then there were a school feeding program for about half the schools in the country. Uh, that involved a lot of hauling. U.S. government provided food to different schools throughout the country, and that was a major task. So those were the three big ones that we had.
Yeah. And with the CRS, were you a one-man band down there? Did you have a
Oh
team
no,
on the
no.
ground?
I had a staff of well, when I started, I was an assistant, a young whippersnapper, and my boss um, went and after six after I got there, 6 months, he went on an extended vacation for health reasons and things like that. And so I had a staff of two other Americans and about 70 Sierra Leoneans.
Wow. Yeah. What were some of the management issues you had during that period of time, particularly
Well,
with
Sierra
refugees?
Leone is not the country with the highest honesty rate.
Mm.
So corruption was a big thing that had to be dealt with all the time. You had to be vigilant. For drivers ripping off the petrol purchases and people stealing, people cheating, and you had to put systems into place that inhibited uh, wherever possible those type of things. And at the same point, going back to the motivation thing, you had to create a climate where people felt they'd get an honest day's uh, wage for an honest day of work, and promulgate that approach, and that helped keep the corruption down.
Yeah. And did you eventually become head of that operation there in
I
CLE?
did, I did, and I stayed there for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
Then I got transferred back to the headquarters in New York in the Africa regional office, where I was an assistant to the regional director, responsible for a portfolio of about $7 million worth of cash to distribute to the CRS programs in 18 countries in sub-Saharan Africa.
Hmm.
So a country would apply for a grant of what, $50,000 to build wells or um, some kind of a medical program, and I would be the one to decide on the allocation.
Right. And then you
I did a
travel to
lot of
those,
traveling.
yeah, I was gonna say travel to those countries too. And did CRS have offices in most of those locations as well, or?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
big offices
Mhm.
uh, in 18 countries when I first took over in the Africa regional office. I eventually, after let's see, about 5 years, um, the Africa regional director retired and I took over as regional director. So then I was managing operations in 21 countries in sub-Saharan Africa and a staff of about 2,000 and multiple offices in some countries.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest challenges during those years? You mentioned about, well and clean water. Of course, that's always been an issue. I'm sure food production as well. But, where did CRS spend most of its its funding in helping the folks in that part of the world.
In front of me, I'm looking at a book about the famine in Ethiopia in
Mm,
1984, 83, 84. Um, famine, drought, war, civil unrest, um, all of that was the bread and butter of CRS. And in between, you try to give people an opportunity to develop their own banking system, a rural banking system, or improve their health, or provide assistance for school kids to get a lunch. Uh, so it was, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, there was a lot of civil unrest um, during my early days as Africa Regional Director. So you have to be out there with your staff. Uh, so I traveled quite a bit.
imagine. And what about the Catholic mission? Was there an underlying opportunity to share the faith? Was that kind of part of what CRS did in those days? And if so, how was that accomplished?
Um, I think it was, I forget uh, who said it, but we took an approach of no, you don't proselytize.
Right.
Uh, so show your faith, show your belief by what you do,
Yeah.
rather than ranting and raving about dogma and theology, and be uh, who you are in what you do. So the selflessness, the simplicity, the manifestation of goodness wherever possible. Um, we weren't climbing over each other's back to uh, get into a position. It wasn't the competitive atmosphere uh, was not encouraged. Um, a cooperative atmosphere was encouraged, and that's how we showed our faith. Now, mind you, of most of those 2,000 people that I managed in the Africa region, most of them were not Catholic,
Right.
and that's another way we showed our faith. We hired the best people to do the best job, whether they were Muslim, whether they were Methodist, or whether they were of no faith,
Right.
no visible religion.
Right. Feeding the hungry. Right.
Yep.
Homing, housing the homeless. Yeah. Doing the stuff that Jesus told us to do. Love it.
Supporting right relations in society,
Yeah.
trying to encourage um, peace and harmony
Right.
uh, in the midst of some terrible, terrible things.
A lot of cooperation with the government, Ambassador. How does
Well,
that play?
the first we collaborated very closely with the Catholic Church in those countries,
Yeah.
and then with other Christian faiths, uh, and then you couldn't operate in the country without a specific agreement with the host government,
Right.
and that often involved the host government paying for the transport of the food we brought in, or giving us some kind of a subvention to support office operations. So yes, it was cooperation and collaboration with the host government as well as local church institutions.
Yeah. Definitely needed their blessing. And were they an obstacle at times as well, or did
The
you?
governments,
Yeah.
uh, well, yes, in the sense that you had, as I mentioned earlier, you had corruption,
Mm,
you had um, well, in a certain period, you had many many African governments had moved into the orbit of the Soviet Union, and that caused us uh, immeasurable problems at
yeah.
times in certain countries, and other times it didn't. They left us alone.
Mm,
But for instance, as I mentioned, in Ethiopia during the famine in 1984. The government had overthrown the emperor in 1974, and it installed a kind of Marxist-Leninist government approach, um, and that was difficult to work with.
I can imagine. So, sub-Saharan Africa, and then what was your next step at CRS?
In 1985, right at the height of the Ethiopian famine, I remember one time I was in Ethiopia three times in 1 week. Uh, I was exhausted. I was trying to set up a program. At the time, it was the biggest program we had in the world. It was $250 million of emergency response. And I tried to do it in collaboration with the Lutheran Church and the Orthodox Church uh, and the World Council of Churches, so that we operated as one.
Hmm.
That was a hard sell and a difficult task. And as I say, that was 1985. I had just about had it. And my boss said, okay, you can step out of the Africa Regional Office for a while and go to the fundraising office, which I did for a year. Then left
And that was
and
back. That was back in New York.
yeah, back in New York.
Hmm.
And then in '86, got married and we moved to the Philippines to take over Sierra's operation in the Philippines. So it was a similar type of operation as I ran in Africa. But the Philippines was a complicated country, so many islands, difficult logistics problems, difficult staffing problems, insurgencies in the south. Um, you just had to be on your toes at all times. But we had a good program there.
That
Again,
was back during Marcos's reign, and
this is after Marcos.
oh, it was after Marcos. Okay.
Yes,
Yep.
during Cory Aquino.
Very cute. Right.
Uh, and
Did the fact that the Philippines was a predominantly Catholic country, was that something
it
that
made it
helped,
easier
or
in that
yeah,
the infrastructure of the Catholic Church was strong,
right,
and we supported that infrastructure to
yeah,
the extent we could. Um, there we had less collaboration with the government and much more collaboration with the Catholic Church,
right,
but it was a good program.
yeah.
Um, but let's see, from there
Now it came
we
next.
we stayed there for 5 years and were transferred back to Africa as uh, assistant regional director for East Africa, based in
Mm,
Kenya. We had one child born in the Philippines, and then we had one child born in Kenya.
mm,
And it was from Kenya that I applied for the job as the CEO of CRS,
yeah.
and I got it.
And what year was that? Did you become CEO?
Let's see, that was 93.
93. Wow. So almost 20 years there as a
Yeah,
CEO then. Yeah.
yep.
Fabulous. And then moved back to New York and then oversaw the organization. How many employees at the time when you were CEO, and what was the
Uh,
budget?
I think by that time it was about 4,000, maybe 5,000.
180 countries, 190 countries. Was your
No, it was more like 100 countries.
100 countries, focusing mostly on the developing world, or did
Oh,
you have
yes.
operations in Western Europe as well, or Eastern Europe perhaps at the time?
We had in Eastern Europe,
Yeah,
particularly during the war in Sarajevo,
right.
in the Balkans, in Kosovo, uh, Yugoslavia. When Yugoslavia fell apart, we set up operations in Serbia, Kosovo, uh, Montenegro, Macedonia, Albania, and Croatia. Where else? Well, we also had a big operation in Poland
Mm,
in the mid 80s,
right.
right before the collapse of
Right before
the
the collapse. Yeah.
Berlin Wall.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And there we collaborated very, very closely with the Catholic Church.
Yeah, very strong Catholic country. Yeah, fabulous. And yeah, gosh, wonderful career, 30 odd years there. What led to your departure and kind of coming to the conclusion that it was time to move on?
I had decided uh, very early in my career, don't hang on any longer than you should. And so I had made the determination that 40 years was my point.
Yeah,
That's when I would quit.
yeah.
And so 2 years before I submitted my resignation, I gave my board of directors, I told them I wanted to retire and I wanted them to have adequate time to find my replacement. So I gave them 2 years. Uh, and then uh, I stepped out and
Mm,
uh, left it in, well, what I thought was reasonably good hands. And it's turned out my successors have been just fine.
yeah.
And they've
Looking
continued to grow the organization.
looking back at your 40 odd years there, what's the accomplishment you're most proud of?
Uh, Actually, it's a might seem a bit strange, but it was basically finding the substance, the spirit of who we were as an organization.
Hmm.
Now that sounds like, well, you don't know who you are. Well, the fact is, we were drifting. Um, we were trying to be a lot of things to a lot of people and uh, responding anywhere we could, following the money. And finally, we came upon something called Catholic social teaching, which is a set of principles that focused us completely. We were focused on um, peace, uh, justice, just societies, uh, poverty, of course, and trying to figure out how we added value, not just monetary value, but as substantive value to each situation we engaged.
Hmm.
Where I'll give you an example. In Sarajevo during the war, you had um, Croats, you had Serbs, Orthodox, um, and you had Muslims, and you had a small Jewish population. And we had the money. We had, I don't know how many million we collected for the Bosnian situation, um, but we could have used that money and given it only to the Catholics, and it would have unbalanced
Hmm.
the relationships in society, so that the Catholics had the money and the Muslims didn't. Or and what we tried to do is bring them together so that it was one pot of money that could be used for. Um, we had a program called Windows 96, I think it was, because of the bombing. Everybody's windows were blown out,
Hmm.
uh, and so we had maybe $500,000 to restore windows. But we gave it to the Muslims, we gave it to the
Yeah.
Jews, we gave it to the Catholics, and we gave it to the Orthodox equally. And that created a good feeling in society, at least some sectors of society. We tried to do the same in many other countries. You can have a disproportionately negative effect when you're pumping money into a situation by creating or reinforcing the imbalances, the social imbalances in society. And we prided ourselves in our ability to support right relationships in society.
Beautiful, needy. So you retired, and then in 2013, you got a pretty interesting phone call to ask you to become ambassador to the Holy See. So
Well,
tell us how
actually,
that came about.
it started a little earlier than that. At
Okay.
my retirement party in February of 2012, I think it was, um, the chief of staff of the Obama administration came up to the retirement party and pulled me aside uh, after all the speeches were finished, and asked me if I wanted to go to be ambassador in the Vatican. And without even consulting my wife, who was there, I said yes. Um, and then it went quiet. That was 2012. We didn't hear anything into the summer of 2012, nothing. Um, and so by uh, winter, maybe November, December 2012, we said, well, I guess that's not going to happen. Um, I was taken into the hospital in January of 2013 with heart valve that had to
Mm,
be replaced. Um, and I came out of the hospital the end of January and was recovering. And in the first week of February 2013, I got a call from that same chief of staff at the White House who said, Ken, do you remember that conversation we had? And I did. I said, yeah, sure. And he said, well, you're still up for it. And thus began the process, uh, which is a lengthy process, actually, because you've got to go and get FBI clearances and background
Senate
checks.
confirmation. Yeah.
Um, and then by, when was it? It was July. I was invited, my wife and I went to ambassador school in Washington,
Mm.
and we're hoping for confirmation from the Senate before they broke for their August recess. And I was told by people at the State Department, there's no way you're going to get confirmation before they break for the recess. Well, my wife and I had just about had it waiting for this thing, and I said, "Well, I'm going to find a way to get confirmation." I uh, I found out which senators were important uh, to get on their committee. I had Catholic bishops from my old CRS board in their constituency, called them up and asked if they would take me for confirmation before they broke for their August recess, which happened. And thus, I was confirmed. Um, I think it was sometime in late July or early August, uh, and thus started uh, my service as ambassador to the Holy See.
Which confirms the old adage, if you don't ask, the answer is no, or maybe, or
That's a
we'll
good
wait.
point. You're right. You're right.
So you went over, and Pope Francis at the time?
Pope Francis had taken over
Yeah.
in February of 2013.
Yeah, just recently before that. Yeah. Yeah. So a new
Um,
administration. Yeah.
and he, in May, I think he was in Brazil um, and had a couple of million people out on Ipanema Beach at a mass. And the world started to realize, hey, this Pope is certainly something. He's he brings people together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I arrived in September of 2013 in the Vatican, he had just called, well, let me back up for a bit. Uh, the U.S. administration had drawn a red line on Syria about uh, weapons. And it looked as though we were going to put warships in the Mediterranean.
Mm.
And the situation, the military situation looked bad. And this new pope calls for a day of prayer worldwide in first week in September. And I'm just arriving as the new American ambassador. And the prayer is that the U.S. will not cross the red line and bomb Syria. And I thought, well, this is going to really be interesting because I'm here to defend or represent the U.S. Government's foreign policy. Uh, and uh, thus began my tour.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, looking back at those, was it 3 years in total you were there?
Almost four.
Almost four. Yeah. What was the highlight? What was the low light?
Um, well, the highlights, because I had worked with CRS in so many countries around the world, I knew people, um, bishops and other people uh, from so many countries around the world.
Right.
And they would all pass through Rome and through the Vatican. And that was an opportunity for me to meet them in a different way and collect information from them in ways that not many other ambassadors really had. Um, Hardly any ambassadors would meet with bishops from Asmara in Eritrea or
Mhm.
from Tegucigalpa in Honduras or bishops from Burma. Uh, and so that gave me as ambassador an extra level of credibility
Right.
in some quarters. Equally, it turns out that many of the people who were staff priests in the Vatican, uh, I had crossed paths with in countries around the world. Uh, so it provided an access and a comfort level that a lot of new ambassadors didn't have at the outset of their term. So that was one thing that was a joy, in fact. Another joy was the fact that if you were the ambassador uh, from Georgia, or let's pick another country, from Peru to the Vatican, you're only worried about what's going on in between the Vatican and the government of Peru. When you're the ambassador from the United States, you have to be worried about issues taking place globally and
Right.
how they relate between the United States and the Vatican, be they North Korea, be they Burma, be they Brazil. Uh, you took you took a position and were expected to be cognizant of what was going on in various far-flung places because the Vatican was involved in those places. So, for instance, in the after the Maidan in Ukraine in 2014, we were we would be involved in every sort of meeting with the Ukrainian ambassador, the Vatican staff, um, and other European ambassadors in trying to figure out uh, where we can have a positive influence. The same was true in so many other countries, from Zimbabwe uh, to Ghana. Uh, we had to play on the global stage.
Right. Biggest challenge?
Um, one of the biggest challenges was being ready when the Pope came to the United States in 2015.
Hmm.
The Pope, as Archbishop or Bishop in Argentina, had never been to the United States. We couldn't even find out whether he had ever passed through Miami. So he really didn't have a sense of the American zeitgeist, who we were, how we think, how we act. Uh, I mean, he knew it from the Latin American perspective, but that is usually looking upward and seeing the Yankee. Uh, so here he is, first time coming to the United States and on my watch. Now, it's not that the Vatican doesn't have staff who know how to organize international visits. They have very, very professional staff. I wasn't worried about the logistics. I was worried about uh, the approach. Pope Francis had made some uh, kind of off-putting statements about women. And I knew that those wouldn't go down well at all if he said anything like he had said previously while he was in the United States. So I tried to feed into the system in the Vatican, feed to those people who would most likely write the speech, do the talking points, uh, feed information that would kind of guide here's who we are, the American character. Um, and so I did a lot of that, a lot of briefings, um, and just getting everything, at least from the US government's perspective, in order for this first um, first visit of this rock star Pope, uh, front cover of Time magazine. Uh, uh, and I mean, people, non-Catholics would come up to me and say, "Boy, I like your Pope." So he was very popular. I just didn't want him not to succeed or to make a faux pas in some way. Um, and so that was a lot of work, uh, and it worked out very well.
Yeah, it was a very successful trip. Well, Ambassador, we're just about out of time, but I think we could talk the rest of the day. But I know you've got other priorities. But we always have one last question we kind of close out our Into the Corner Office podcast on, and that's what kind of career and life advice, as a former CEO yourself, would you give to someone that has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Oh, be true to yourself. Know what you
Mm,
believe, and then follow it. Um, but you got to take the time to figure out who you are and what you believe.
mm. Amen. I love that. My guest today has been Ambassador Ken Hackett. He was the president and CEO of Catholic Relief Services, a organization he served for the better part of 40 years, the last 20 as president and CEO, and most recently was the ambassador to the Holy See in Vatican City. Ambassador Hackett, thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Thank you, Brent.
Hey listeners, we're now including your questions with our CEO guests. If you'd like to send in a voice memo, send it to info@go4roi.com and we'll read it on the air to one of our future CEO guests. Thanks so much for listening and share it with friends.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.go4roi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.